the information of the body. We are on the budget bill, Chapter 2, Part 6, Miscellaneous Educational Provision. Senator Judy Wampa, do you have a motion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we give the privilege of the floor for Speaker Lyndon H. Jackson and his staff with the Koshrai Legislature.
No objection, no. Will you all stand to be recognized? Yeah, okay, well, yeah, thank you very much for being here. We are discussing the budget of the government of Guam for the fiscal year 2008. And so we're right now on the Committee of the Whole. Let me ask you, what are you a Senate or a senator or a representative? Speaker, okay, Speaker of the Senate or President of the Senate or President of the House? Or is it unicameral? So it's a do they call you Senator? Okay. And they call everybody Senator, but Mr. Speaker, you're here. We're very happy to have you here and join us. You want to say a few remarks, Acting Speaker, before we proceed on?
Okay, Speaker Jackson, again, in behalf of the legislature, we just want to welcome you in half a day. And you've come in a very opportune time because we are now in the ongoing deliberations for the fiscal year 08 budget. And of course, our government has had many issues dealing with trying to fund services, priority services of the government, as well as to deal with much of our long-term obligations. But we've had this in a very depressed economy and with lowering revenues coming into the government of Guam. So it's been quite a task. And we look forward to your observations and maybe your critique after this session. But welcome to the island of Guam. Hafaday.
Speaker, are those your staff? Yeah, would you like them to be together with their counterpart here? Wow, so the staff. What I mean is the staff. Would you like them to be with their counterpart here in the Guam Legislature?
Yes, but before you allow them to meet with our fellow distinguished senators here in Guam, I would like to take this opportunity to, on behalf of my staff who are with me, to thank the Office of the Speaker who has approved this training with the Guam Legislature. We have been corresponding to each other in regards to the training that you see us here this morning. And I would like to, on behalf of them, to thank you for allowing us this opportunity to be trained here in this chamber or your offices. And I am very pleased and honored to bring them here in Guam, to introduce them to the appropriate person that will be do the training. And it is truly my honor to take this opportunity to thank you all. And I would also like to, on behalf of the people of Koshrai, to bring our greetings to you, senators of the Guam Legislature. We understand that you are very busy in discussing and deliberating on the FY08 budget. And I think our being here is very timely because next week in Koshrai, we will be calling a special session also to consider the FY08 budget for the state of Koshrai. So with that, I would like to thank you, and if I can allow my staff to meet with you esteemed senators. Thank you very much.
We'll take a minute recess. To to order. Again, we are in Chapter 2, Part 4, Miscellaneous Educational Provision, Section 1. Anything on Section 1? None? Okay. Section 1, the last time. Okay, we're now in Section 2, reporting requirement. Senator Judy Wampat.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to delete Section 2 in its entirety, only because it is repeated in pages 91 to 92 of Chapter 7, Section 2. So I don't see the need for having the same section repeated again.
Okay, the motion of Senator Wampat is to delete in its entirety page 22, line 7, section 2. Wait. And on page 23, from line 1 to line 9, on that motion. Senator Simiso.
I just have a question on this. Mr. Speaker, I'm looking back at page 91 and 22. This reporting requirement, is this similar to what happened earlier in our supplemental budget whereby agencies were being deducted a percentage of their appropriations if they don't meet the reporting requirement? Is this that similar?
Who are you directing the question to?
I'm directing it to you, I guess.
No, you can't. I cannot answer your
Okay,
question.
then I'll redirect it to the mover of the
Okay, Senator Wampat.
amendment.
Mr. Chairman, in section, in page 22 to 23, of course, that's just a reporting requirement. It does not have any penalty clause on this particular provision, but on page 92, if you read in the first paragraph, which are in lines 3 and 4, the amendment that I had offered, and it was in 2902, there is that penalty clause for the chief financial officers, the deputies, directors, so that 20% is still there. So that's just repeating what was passed in 2902.
So there is a distinct difference between page 22, 23, and that of page 91 in terms of the reporting requirement.
Senator Wampat. There is similarity.
Yes, if you look at page 91,
No,
everything in section 2 is exactly the same as page 22. When you read lines 10 to 24, the language are there. The only thing that's different is that it says providing a written report, providing electronic format, posting of the report on the website.
And then it goes on.
But then you're right.
Then it goes on.
You're right, and then
So it's different. And in fact, it's different, and it also conflicts, because the failure of any official or board to give notice required in the shall not affect the de-appropriation and remittance of fund. So on page 23, it's de-appropriations to the agency funds. On page 92, it's much more punitive and much more specific to an individual's salary, gross salary per pay period, and gross salaries of a deputy and chief financial officer to reduce their salary by 20% of the remainder of the fiscal year for failing to comply with any reporting requirement mandated by. So one is towards the appropriation, and the other one is punitive to. There's no punitiveness in page 23, but 92 there is to a director, chief financial officer, deputy director, to their own salary. Right. So if you remove this this provision of the reporting requirement, because it's similar, um, it's not. It's not. So, I saw what happened last time. I saw almost the fiasco of what happened last time with the different agencies coming in when we were splitting hairs to de-appropriate the agencies, and already the agencies were short. I mean, is there any other? I like to keep this section in because it makes it clear that it's not de-appropriating the agencies. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, on the motion to delete section 2 in its entirety, line 7 on page 22 all the way down to 26, and on page 23, line 1 all the way down to line 9. On that motion, Senator Ben Pangilinan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I support the motion, and basically, this is what happens when we kind of just copy budgets from years before. And that really is what this is. When the legislature passed the budget in the 28th Guam Legislature, it passed one budget for the Department of Education, and then it passed public health, public welfare, public safety, I guess, public education, public safety, and public health. And then it passed for the other operations. And then we came back and redid additional budgets 2 to 3 more times in order to resolve the financial crisis that we were told we were in. And so what happened, of course, is when we redid the budget in 2903 and 2902 and 01, we basically then changed some of the reporting requirements from what was happened in 28, 149 and 150. And so the language in page 91 is what came about from 2902 and 03. And the language that you have on page 23 is what came from 28, 149 and 150. So it really is that the way the budget's been developed, we just kind of cut and paste. Much like our numbers, we kind of cut and paste. We just decide that we think this is going to work, and we just kind of redo it. We don't build it back from the ground up in terms of our budget, and we don't even do that for some of the administrative provisions. So that really is what's happening here. The more stringent language, the fact that we didn't want to de-appropriate the agencies, because you remember, Mr. Speaker, when we de-appropriated the money, we came back in with 3 weeks or 1 week later with a financial crisis that everybody's going to get laid off, and we had the furloughs because we de-appropriated them based upon this language in here. From that, we find out that didn't work. Or we blinked. Basically, the legislature blinked. And the legislature decided that we were going to reinstate those. And then we didn't have the money, so we raised fees. Or the legislature raised fees because I voted no on those fee increases. And then we were going to not do the fee increases, but then 21 million finally came from Washington out of the blue. So from all of those things is what we have here. And like I said, rather than building the budget from the ground up, we just kind of kept cutting and pasting. So this is the old language, the old reporting, the old punitive measures that the legislature decided wasn't going to implement. And so it'll just now be controlled by the latest iteration of those punitive measures in 2902 and 03, which is what's contained in 91. So deleting this really brings us kind of up to date on it. And so I support the deletion.
Okay, on the motion by Senator Wampat, any objection? So ordered. So the clerk will renumber the rest. We are now on section 3, local funds reimbursement. Senator Ben Pangilinan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm quite concerned on this because, again, we better have a really good idea of what we're doing here and the reimbursement mechanism. And I know we kind of get these assurances, eternal as always, from the different departments and agencies that we really don't use local funds. We get our reimbursement reimbursement from the federal funds electronically 4 days after the payroll, which kind of like leads me to how do we then get the money for payroll? It's 4 days after the payroll. But I just want to get assurances, I guess, from either the committee chair of finance or the chairman of education that this in no way will jeopardize the ability of the department to meet its obligations, waiting for federal funds for the programs to be transferred to the Department of Education or the Guam Public School System to ensure then that they don't run out of funds, because this prohibits, the fronting of money, I guess, for from local funds for federally funded program activities of the Guam Public School System. So I'd like to either get the committee who placed this in here, I guess, or the chair, the Committee on Finance, or the chair of Education, just to kind of just make sure that at least my question is, and my concern is addressed. Thank you very much.
Senator Kawu, will you yield to the question?
Yes, Mr. Chair, yeah, and it's a very good question. This particular provision was also included in our prior budget, and again, for the reasons that there has been some concerns, and it has occurred in the past, in regards to the Guam Public School System and the management of their funding, where it appears that there has been the use of local funds to pay for federal programs. This particular language ensures that it will not, but the concerns that the previous speaker, Senator had, are addressed in lines 12, 13, and 14. And again, this is, if I can just repeat the language, Ilustratum Guam shall not be used to pay for federally funded program activities and expenditures unless payment is specifically authorized by local statute, or, and here's the language, unless payment is for expenditures for grants that require local expenditures prior to federal reimbursement. So there is an allowance for the use of local funds to pay, as long as, again, there is that reimbursement.
Thank you very much for that question, Mr. Speaker. I mean, I read that. I'm fully aware of that. I'm just saying that what happens for those federal funds that do not require, that are 100% federally funded, but may take 2, 4, 6, 8, 14 days to be transferred to pay for the expenditures incurred. So it's just those quirks that may occur where, for example, I don't know, the internet goes down or the system for electronic transfers goes down, and then you have a situation where the money's not able to be transferred from the federal coffers. The high-risk status of the Department of Education for the drawdown of funds have not been fully cleared up, so we may not be able to get money up front in order to cover the cost of that. So I fully realize the fact that those, for local grant matching requirements, but it is those 100% federally funded programs that are not authorized to be covered by local expenditures. And if a glitch should happen there, then I just want to make sure that we don't leave 40 million worth of expenses at the Guam Public School System outstanding because we can't make a payment using local funds. So those are my only concerns, but if everybody's comfortable with it, I've expressed my concern on this. Thank you.
Okay, on Section 3, Senator Wampat.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, on line 16, I think there's an error there where it shouldn't read fiscal year 2007, but 2008.
Okay, on line 16, change 2007 to 2008. No objection, so ordered. Anything else? None? Senator Judy Utherts on Section 3.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to offer a simple amendment. Oh, we're on Section 3?
Yes.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Okay, any other speaker on Section 3? If none, we're on Section 4. Continuing appropriation. Any objection? No objection? We are now on Chapter 3, Part 1, Department of Public Health and Social Service. What? I, okay, Senator Guthers.
Chairman, I would like to add just two things to Section 4, very simple. And I'd like to insert it after the Dr. Tony C. Yamashita Education Corps. I would like to insert, comma, the University of Guam and Guam Community College. The reason, Mr. Chairman, is that, as you know, the University of Guam and Guam Community College are still trying to...
You do have that in writing though, right?
Do I have to put it in writing, just adding University of Guam and Guam Community College after Yamashita Teacher Corps?
Just make sure the clerk knows.
I'll go
about
up,
it,
I'll go up. Mr. Chairman, the reason is that University of Guam and Guam Community College are still trying to get the monies that are owed to them for fiscal year 2007 that they desperately need for their programs. So I think it would be very prudent for us to include that here, and hopefully they'll be able to get that money. Thank you very much.
Okay, on the Gotthard's amendment on Section 4, page 23, to include after Dr. Antonio C. Yamashita Educator Course, comma, University of Guam, comma, and Guam Community College. That is your amendment, Senator Goddard? Okay. On the Goddard's amendment, Senator Yamashita.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The author of the amendment will yield to this question. Do you know what the balances are?
Will you hear? Senator Goddard.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, for the
Yes.
university, it's about $7 million.
Senator Goddard.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, for
Face
the
the chair.
university, it's about $7 million, and for Guam Community College, I understand it's almost $4 million.
And has that been incorporated in terms of their budget request? That would
Yes.
add on towards their budget request.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
And would that impact the revenues that we need to adjust to be able to come up with $11 million or more as a result of this section?
My understanding, Mr. Chairman, is that the governor's office and BBMR committed themselves to releasing the monies to the university and Guam Community College that are owed to them.
Before the end of the fiscal year.
Yes.
So you don't trust that, so we want to make sure that it's
Yes.
at least,
Yes,
we give them a little bit more breathing time to be able to accomplish it.
that's right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, on the Gotthard's amendment, any objection on the Gotthard's amendment? Okay, without objection, Senator Pangilinan? Okay, Gotthard's amendment passed. Okay, we're complete. We're finished with Chapter 2. We're now on Chapter 3. We'll take 1 minute recess. Chapter 3, Part 1, Department of Public Health and Social Service. Okay, Section 1 do have a subsection A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. Okay, on Section 1, Public Health. If none, Section 1, Senator Ben.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I guess I'm trying to kind of just see where we're at on this, comparing this to the appropriation that was contained in the governor's submittal and trying to look at it from last year's. And wanted to know, the governor's submittal showed the Department of Public Health at $49,394,056. and we show a reduction of almost $2 million in this appropriation level. And I was wondering if there was an identification of where those reductions occurred. So I'm just concerned about that reduction in the public health budget.
Are you asking somebody to heal or not? Just, okay.
I'd like to ask the Committee on Finance to see where the cut was made.
Okay, Senator Calvo.
Again, I think some of the media reports in the appropriations, that they did not take into consideration appropriation from general fund and special funds. The governor's bill 143, if you were to add the general fund appropriations plus miscellaneous appropriations, it tallies to 50,459,568. With OFB, our budget also contains 50,459,568 on separate appropriations using several funding sources. And then when you combine special fund and federal match, the total difference between the governor's budget request, which is 80,458,389, that compares with what we have in totality when it comes to general, special fund, and federal match at 80,667,862. There's the breakdowns. We could provide breakdowns for the particular categories, but again, that's the bottom line in here. There has not been a reduction in appropriations, but there has been an allocation of sources from different areas.
It would be very helpful, Mr.
Sure.
Mr. Mr. Chair, if the body could get those breakdowns, because if we're shifting appropriations from different programs, then I'd like to be able to kind of see those program changes to ensure that we're
Sure.
not.
I think what I'll again defer to the question, Mr. Chair. The major, if there's one area there that you'll see the use of certain funding, it's for the refinancing of the tobacco bond money, tobacco funds, which is in the back. That will be followed, I think, in the miscellaneous area. But
So-
I could get the breakdown.
Yeah, but remember, if part of the appropriation is from the refunding of the tobacco, remember, Mr. Speaker, that we had to come back in here because part of the funding for the entire GovGuam operations was from the issuance of bonds that never happened. $8 million was supposed to be from the savings. And so if we're beginning to appropriate proceeds of bond funds, refinancings that have not happened, or appropriating proceeds of bond issues that have not happened, then we really are at an unbalanced budget to begin with, because you can't be appropriating those monies that haven't happened, because we saw what happened when we did that. We had to come in here and we were faced with a crisis because of the fact that we were short in the operating requirements of this government, because we started appropriating lapse funds and we started appropriating refinancing cost savings from these funds. So I would like to see then, if that's the case, of how much of an appropriation are we using for operations from authorizations to refinance and then appropriating those savings, if we are doing that. I'd just like to
Sure.
be very clear on that.
Sure.
Would you like a minute recess so you can work on it? Otherwise, your time
Actually,
is up.
it's in the bill, and obviously, the good senator was the first one, and again, very creatively, to use the bond settlement money for appropriations in the past. And again, this is similar in the intents in which the good senator, the previous speaker, had used against securitization of tobacco settlement funds.
Yes,
But it
that's
is in
be-
page 108,
that
Mr.
is
Chair.
because we floated the bonds, we had the cash, and when we had the cash, we appropriated the money. Now we don't have the cash, Mr. Speaker, so we authorized the issuance, And they were not to fund the operations, they were to fund projects and so forth that were not part of the operating requirements for payroll, for supplies, and so forth. And if we are doing that now, then I think we all should be aware of it. Thank you.
Okay, well, on section 1 then. None? Oh, we're in section 2. Special funds, appropriation for operation. On this one? Senator Ben, on
Yes,
section
Mr.
2?
Speaker. Again, I was trying to look for the previous appropriation for the community health center budgets, and I just want to be very clear, of course, that we've seen an expansion in the community health centers. The Dedido Community Health Centers have just expanded its floor space. It requires additional employment of doctors and so forth, and I just hope that this budget accounts for the additional operating costs of those in terms of power, water, etc., and the additional personnel for that. So I'm sure somebody figured that out, I hope.
Yep.
Thank you.
If I can defer to the question again, a good question.
The
Again,
gentleman is not asking for.
oh, okay. It has been accounted for, unlike the
Thank you.
original Bill 143.
Any other comments on section 2? Section 3, Government of Guam Health and Human Services Fund. None? Okay, we're in section 4. We're now in section 5. MIP and Medicaid carryover. Senator Respicio,
Thank you, Mr.
section
Chairman.
5.
Could I just ask, what is the current unexpended balance of the appropriations?
Who do you,
Because, I guess to the Chairman of Finance and Taxation, because this section would authorize a carryover for the unexpended balance of appropriations from the general fund
Senator,
for MIP and
will you
Medicaid
yield to
programs.
the question of Senator Respicio?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. I was in discussions
Senator
with one of my
Respicio,
staffers.
can you
please
your
repeat the
question
questions?
again? Sorry.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, the question is, I'd want to know what the unexpended balance is of appropriations, because this is a carryover provision for MIP and Medicaid programs from FY 2007 to be carried over for the upcoming 08 fiscal year.
Yeah. Mr. Chair, I don't have that number with me. If you care, we could take a minute recess to get the information.
Will it matter if the information is taken?
I'm just wondering, just as general concept, are we keeping track of all the unexpended balances? Because this would be on top of the current revenue projection for 08. So theoretically, we just passed an amendment by the Senator from Manila that would carry over $11 million worth of unexpended appropriations. So you'd add $11 million to the top of the current revenue projection presented by OFB of $489 million. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. We're now on chapter 3, part 2. Department of Integrated Services for Individuals with Disabilities. We have section 1 here that has subsection A, B, and C. Senator Respicio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to ask, I know that further back in this proposal for the $90 million bond borrowing, there's monies that would go to, I guess, is to at least begin to address the consent decree for DISID and for mental health. If that bond borrowing proposal does not garner enough support, Mr. Chairman, would we be able to come back to this section and make the necessary adjustments so that this legislature can address that requirement? I'm just asking procedurally, how would we address that when we get to that point in this discussion?
The only way I can answer you, Senator Respicio, is to, right now, the Committee of the Whole cannot reconsider any action of the body. But whatever the, the action of the body in the very end, and would change the tone of the whole bill, then definitely something has to be done. So, anyway, Chapter 3, Part 2, Section 1. Okay? Chapter 3, Part 3. And we have Section 1 that has subsection A and B. Department of Mental Health. Senator Judy Wampat.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have a question because I was trying to see whether there is a consolidation here on Section 3 where the youth drug and alcohol program, because I know at one time we did have a separate section for adult drug and alcohol program, and I'm wondering whether that dollar amount then and the two groups have been consolidated. Mr.
Are you
Chairman,
asking that question to
I'm
Senator
asking
Cowell?
the chairman, yes, of OFD.
Where's Senator Cowell? Okay, let's. Senator Cowell. Senator Wampat has a question for you.
My question is that
Okay, we are on Section 1, A and
Oh.
B, but you're making reference to Section 3, huh?
yes, I thought you were doing the whole.
No.
No, it's as Section 1, but it's oh wait, you're right, Section 3.
Okay, so you have no objection to Section 1 until we get to Section 3, right? Okay, so we're now on anybody on Section 1? Section 2? None. Okay, Senator Wampat, we're in Section 3.
So in Section 3, it says Youth Drug and Alcohol Program, and I know that we had actually did an appropriation at one time for the adult drug and alcohol program. So my question is that is this just for the youth and not the adults anymore, or is it combined? And where are we going to address the adult drug and alcohol program?
Senator Cowell?
Oh, sure. Again, the dollar figure was, again, basically the request made by the agency. They believe this is adequate to fund, again, youth drug and alcohol programs. But I think specific to Section 3, this is particular just to the youth, and those folks that are under 18, and it's separate from the from other programs that deal with adults, which will be addressed, I think, in the next page.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You're right. I did read subsection B. It's not, however, specific, and I just want to really make sure again at the same time that we do not neglect the adults who would need to be a part of this drug and alcohol program. So I know the language recalls for drug and alcohol detoxification, rehab, prevention services. So I guess technically if you're going to separate just the youth and then of course the child programs earlier, then maybe then the monies would be used for the adults. I just want to make sure that they are taken care of.
Thank you. On Section 3, any more? None. We completed that section or chapter. We're now on Chapter 3, Part 4, GMH. Section 1. None. Section 2. Senator Ben.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this section, and I just wanted to speak a little bit because of the reference that was made on the tobacco securitization by the good chairman of the Committee on Finance in the previous where we appropriated the money and so forth. And this really is evidence of that what we did was, of course, we authorized the securitization of tobacco settlement funds, and then we set up trust funds, Mr. Speaker, trust funds at Guam Hospital, trust funds at Department of Mental Health for prevention programs, trust fund at Public Health, a trust fund at GCC, and a trust fund at UOG. So of the total money that we securitized when we floated those bonds, Mr. Speaker, of which is not a general obligation bond of the government, it's actually a revenue bond, a special revenue bond from the payment of our tobacco settlement that we would have had to wait over 25 years to get. We took the cash up front and then spent half of it at GMH to fund capital improvement projects there, and then set up the balance in a trust fund. And look, Mr. Speaker, 5 years after we floated those bonds, we still are appropriating money out of those bond funds. Why? Because we didn't spend it all. We set up accounts that allow that fund to grow in perpetuity so that we will have money available to meet operational requirements on a yearly basis. And from the $13 million that was given to the Guam Memorial Hospital, $7 million was spent on capital improvement projects, and about $7 million was put into a trust fund. And 5 years later, we're appropriating, rather than wasting all that money and spending it all at one time, 5 years later, we're appropriating almost $800,000 in interest. And you know what, Mr. Speaker? $70,000 went back into the corpus of that fund. So now that fund has grown by almost $500 to $1 million in additional capital in that trust fund, and we still have over $700,000 to spend. That's the way I think, Mr. Speaker, we need to structure our financing, our borrowing, etc. Not just to borrow for operational, appropriate it, and it's all gone. And so this, Mr. Speaker, and you'll see that we're making appropriations from the GCC Trust Fund. You'll see we're making appropriations from the Public Health Trust Fund. You'll see that we're making appropriations from the UOG Trust Fund, so that these individual institutions and the programs at mental health will continually have funding to operate programs for tobacco prevention, technology advancement, and education in the different departments and agencies. And Mr. Speaker, I note that. I note the fact that we structured that as a body. When I came up with a concept, and this body supported and worked with everyone to make that a reality, and we're seeing the fruits of our labor. And that's the way I think we need to take a look at government financing, not just borrow the money and spend it and let our children worry. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speaker? If none, we completed part 4. We're now on chapter 3, part 5, section. Okay, this section 1 has subsection A, B, C, D, and E. Senator Wampat.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a general question. I know that every single one of these funds have been
What do you want to?
I'm on just a general thing for all the fund, basically, because...
No. Okay, I just wanted to know who do you want to...
Oh, no. Well, yes, the chairman may be right.
Okay.
So in the public hearings when the EPA came in, did they give basically a balance for every one of these fund, the Air Pollution Control Fund, Environmental Trust Fund, Water Research and Development Fund, Water Protection Fund, whether there are any balances from these funds, or is it, because I know it supports the individual programs there, and whether there's any provision for a continuation of those funds if there are balances, because these are the amounts in which basically are cash that are available. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other speaker in chapter 3, part 5? If none, we have completed part 5. Okay, you want to speak on part 5?
Yeah, just real
Okay.
quick, Mr. Speaker. I was consulting with our legal counsel, Mr. Speaker, to try to find that environmental trust fund. I'm a little concerned because the environmental trust fund, if I remember correctly, and that's what I was doing, consulting with the legal counsel to find the source and the use for this fund. My understanding, if I'm correct, is that this trust fund is to set aside money for emergency cleanup of environmental disasters. It also is supposed to fund the HASU Guam for the pickup and disposal of hazardous household waste, and so forth. And now we're kind of like opening it up in terms of the use of the funds for operating expenditures, miscellaneous expenditures, and so forth of the Guam Environmental Protection Agency. And you know, I'm just concerned about that because that was again a targeted use of that money, and we wanted to ensure that the funds remain available for those. And now we're kind of delving into it and using it for operations. So that's my concern with that, Mr. Speaker. I just want to voice that concern because I think that what we need to do is continue the HESA Guam program, the pickup of batteries, household, old paints, leaded paints, backyard mechanics who change their oil and allowing them an opportunity to dispose of it in an environmentally safe manner rather than storing it in the backyard and then having it leak out into our environment and so forth. And if this fund is not available for those kind of programs because they're now being used for miscellaneous expenses, then I think we're digressing from the intention of that fund and putting in even a greater danger to our environment by taking those monies and using them for other expenses. Thank you.
Thank you. Good timing. Okay. Very good. Okay, we have completed part 5 of chapter 3, part 5. We have completed. We are now chapter 4, part 1. Section 1, Guam Police Department has 3 subsections. Okay, section A, B, and C. On section 1, Senator Respicio.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, is this amount sufficient to run the operations of the Guam Police Department? I'm pleased to see that it's a $2 million increase over what the governor's recommending in his original Bill 143 of $19.3 million. But I'm also a little concerned that the acting chief of police voluntarily requested a reduction of $2.4 million. And when he was here at the public hearing, I recall very clearly that there's several members of the legislature that criticized him for voluntarily wanting to reduce the funding to GPD at a time when those officers need as much resources as possible. So it is a $2 million increase over Bill 143, the original submission, but is this $21.3 million sufficient? Just a yes or no answer.
Do you want to have anybody heal to that?
It doesn't matter, Mr. Chairman. I'm sure the
Senator Calvo.
Chairman of Public Safety is working collaboratively with
Yes.
Yes.
There's been discussions with the Guam Police Department and the administration, so they
Okay,
feel this
thank
is
you.
adequate.
Thank you.
Okay, we're in section 2 now. Any question? Okay, section 3. Section 3. Senator Wampat.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to know, because I remember that we had appropriated a certain dollar amount for this, and so my question is that because we're trying to keep a running tally of whether the entire amount has not been expended, or if so, how much are we looking that's available that would actually go into the new
You want
year?
Senator Calvo or Senator Tenori to yield to that?
Yes, the chairman of the committee, Public Safety Committee, Mr.
Senator Tenori, will you yield to the question by Senator Wampat?
The balance for the purchases of the motorcycles.
Is the original, thank you very much, I'll yield to the question. The original amount that was appropriated is still available in the account. The department is actively pursuing the purchase of these vehicles, motorcycles. But of course, they need to make sure that they're on order, all the specifications are in place. The same amount that was appropriated should be the same amount in the account, but of course, that's expected to change before the end of the fiscal year. It could have already taken place by this date. That's that number that we appropriated in the bill is available, and that will be expended in its entirety, I suspect.
Okay, any more on section 3? None. We are now on chapter 4, part 2, section 1. Section 1 has 4 subsection A, B, C, D. Guam Fire Department. Senator Espicio.
Thank you,
Section 1.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I just get an update on whether or not this $24.7 million is also budgeted to address the firefighters' concerns relative to back pay? I understand there was a recent court case and both parties stipulated to.
Which gentleman do you want to have this thing healed to?
They're both sitting next to each other. I don't want to put anybody in a position, Mr. Chairman. I just want an update as to whether or not this $24.7 million will address.
Don't worry,
their concern.
I'll decide who's going to get it. So, okay, Senator Calvo?
Again, based on the proposed request from the department, we are taking into account what they feel is adequate to fund their operations. I don't have an answer as to whether, again, the question that the previous senator is requesting. We do acknowledge that the department has set forth that this was a number that was adequate to fund their operations and services.
But does this address the concerns of the back pay or the back pay concerns that the firefighters have brought up?
Further word has come from the department, so I don't have an answer to that.
So a yes or no answer is more like a no than
No.
a yes, right?
No.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, section 2. We have now completed section part 2. Okay, Senator Wampet, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, what I wanted to do is to add a new section with section 3, but it's being typed out right now, but let me just tell you briefly what it is. And I've spoken to the chairman. What it would actually call for is that it would be a temporary employment of retired firefighters as a result of military activation. And that language, there's not a dollar amount that would affect this. It's just, we spoke with the chief, and they have had several of their officers, their firefighters, actually activated, and it has hampered their operations, and would like the same language as well for them. So it is being prepared. If you would like to give me a moment of recess to get that out.
Senator Wampet, I'll give you any moment.
Thank you.
We're in recess until you get your Okay, the Committee of the Whole is back. And before I continue, for the information of the body, especially those that weren't here earlier, I'd like to reintroduce the Speaker of the Kusrai State Legislature, Speaker Jackson, back there. Yeah, Speaker Jackson from Kusrai. Okay, we have the Wampets Amendment here. This is for Chapter 4, Part 2, and it's going to be a new Section 3. Any objection? No objection? So ordered. We're in Chapter 4, Part 2, Guam Fire Department. No, wait. We already got this. Department of Correction, Chapter 4, Part 3. something. Okay, we're on chapter 4, part. Okay, which one? Okay, Senator Guthertz, you're recognized on chapter 4, section 1.
First, my question is, does the Finance Committee feel that this budget is adequate to meet the needs of the Department of Corrections? And then my second question is, basically to my colleagues, would it not be prudent to be consistent with the Department of Corrections as we were with the Guam Police Department and the Guam Fire Department with reference to their shortages of personnel, because they also have quite a number of personnel that are in the National Guard and in the Army Reserves.
I guess to the answer to the first one.
Oh, it's already in here? Okay. Then never mind the second point. The first point then. Do we have adequate monies here for the operations of the Department of Corrections?
Are you asking me?
I'm asking the Chair of Finance.
Will you hear Senator Calvo?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yes.
My question has been answered. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we're chapter 3, chapter 4 now. Chapter 4, part 4. That's section 1, 2, and 3. Section 1. Okay, we're on section 2. We're in section 3. Okay, Department of Youth Affairs is over. We're now on chapter 4, part 5, Office of the Chief Medical Examiner. Okay. None. We're in chapter 4, part 6, Custom and Quarantine Agency. Okay. We're in chapter 4, part 7, Office of the Attorney General, Department of Law. Have section 1 and subsection A and B. Okay, without any question, chapter 5, part 1. Okay, why don't we recess and be back by 2 o'clock? Okay, since nobody objects that we have a recess until 2 o'clock, so ordered. June 1. Senator Calvo.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I have an amendment particular to this section, and it's more for house cleaning. There was an accounting error in the reconciliation of the numbers. So the amendment I'm passing out is, again, to ensure a balanced budget, and it just makes certain subtotal general total changes as well as subtotal changes, in particular to K, which is Department of Parks and Rec. But the amendment is being passed out.
Make sure it's a nice one. Senator Calvo, your amendment
Yes, Mr. Chair.
is just actually
There was an
deleting.
error in accounting and adding.
Yeah, well, in a way, you're just deleting chapter 5, part 1, section 1, right?
Yes, sir.
And
Oh,
Right.
I mean, it was in part K. Oh,
yeah, so
Oh, you're
why
right.
don't we to make it easier,
how do I do this?
just delete the entire section 5, part
Oh,
1, section 1, and replace it with this one.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'd like to, again, make a motion, and my amendment is to delete the entirety of Section 1 of Part 1 of Chapter 5 with this substituted amendment.
Okay, that's the cleanest way to do it. You know. Okay. Any objection in changing, just substituting this section for the new corrected section by Senator Calvo? No objection, so ordered. Okay, on the amended section now. Question, Senator Pangilinan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I have an amendment that I wanted to make on section or subsection G of this bill, Mr. Speaker, is being passed out right now. You know, Mr. Speaker, during the budget, we're giving basically lump sum budgets now to these departments and agencies, and I'm concerned specifically with the Department of Public Works, because during the budget hearing, when we looked at the breakdown of the budget for the Department of Public Works, I noticed in the budget that they had a detailed budget for the personnel, supplies, and so forth. And under the category for transportation for school bus operations, they had $0 for gas. So in other words, Mr. Speaker, in the detailed budget that was submitted to during that budget hearing, Department of Public Works did not budget at all for gasoline for the school buses. And when I asked Director Paris, he goes, "Oh, we don't need it, you know, because we're just going to rely that the governor feels good every day and that he'll transfer money for gas for the school buses." I said, but you're budgeting for every other requirement of the department and agency except for the gas. And he goes, "Yeah, but, you know, we get along well with the governor, and he's going to transfer that money." So I suggested to him that he zero out his salary, and maybe the governor will transfer money for his salary and put in a line item for the bus operations for gas, but he said, nope, he didn't want to do that. So what I want to do, Mr. Speaker, in this is to be very clear, only because they were so clear in their budget presentation, and it would be to amend Section G of this under the Department of Public Works and add in a line item after the appropriation of 8702545 for under general fund, add the words, "of which $600,000 shall be used for school bus fuel." And I wanted to be very clear on that because, Mr. Speaker, the department is very clear in their budget for all the other requirements of the department, with the exception that they budgeted $0 for fuel. So I want to add that of the $8 million, $600,000 will be for school bus fuel. And that's my amendment, Mr. Speaker.
On the Pangilinan amendment. Any objection? Okay, since there's no objection, so ordered. Okay, any others? Senator Respicio.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd asked this question. I know that several of our colleagues will follow up. Could somebody please explain the solid waste operation fund, this $5.8 million? Is this just strictly going to, I know the funding is the tipping fee, right? The funding source? This is strictly going to current public works operation and has nothing to do with the consent decree?
Do you want someone to yield to that?
Yes, Mr.
Can somebody yield to the question, Senator Calvo?
That is correct, the statement made by the earlier speaker, that the solid waste operations fund goes into the operations at DPW. And that is strictly its purpose.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That's what I thought. Thank you.
Okay, on the entire section 1, Senator Wampat.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On U for medical referral office, I understand that they are now preparing to put out an RFP. And my question here and concern, of course, if they're doing an RFP, and I hope the chairman can answer then, is that this dollar amount that we're looking at here is not something that's going to be, well, I guess we won't really know, but would it open up an opportunity for them to come back again to, if this dollar amount is insufficient based on the RFPs, to outsource the Hawaii and Los Angeles offices? Did you hear from them at all in the public hearing what their plans are, and would this dollar amount be sufficient to operate both offices?
Somebody yield to that, Senator Cowell, regarding the
I'm
medical
sorry,
referral
I missed the
office.
question again. Can you repeat
About
that?
the outsourcing of the medical referral office. Senator Wampet, can you just
Can you please
repeat your
repeat
question?
the Senator?
We understand that they're going to outsource, and they have mentioned this sometime earlier. And so my question then would be, is this dollar amount that we're looking at sufficient to run, I mean, all three offices, but more importantly, the other two that are going to be outsourced?
Based on the testimony and presentation made by the referral office, this should be adequate.
Okay, any other question? Okay, section 1, none. We move to Senator Barnes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have an inquiry in reference to the solid waste operational funds. Mr. Chair, just within the last couple of weeks, DPW had informed some of the policy makers that they were going to request for funding in reference to the ongoing land in Ledson and some operating costs. So I know that nobody's here from DPW, but I'd like to question the funding source and the breakdown of that 5.8 million, if I may, because I think it's really important based on the presentations that I've received in the last couple of weeks, and I just want to try and reconcile the numbers. So if I may, Mr. Chair, if I can yield to the chairman, to the oversight chair, to see if I can have that breakdown, just to make sure that the numbers that were presented to us in the LRC meeting reconciles with the numbers that I have here.
Yes, Senator Cowell.
Yes, if I could call for a couple minutes recess so I can go to the back and pull out the details and the breakdown for the operational budget for DPW Solid Waste Division.
Okay, recess until we get the information. Senator Tina Munya Barnes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, I'd just like to take the time to thank the Chair on Finance and Budgeting for providing the necessary information. Again, my inquiries were based on presentation that was provided to me by DPW, and I just want to make sure that the funding source that was provided would be for operational expenses and all that, and just making sure that the numbers we have on hand are reconciled properly. So again, Mr. Chair, as we continue to go on in reference to this, I will go ahead and come back to it when on the other part, on the other section of the budget. Thank you.
Okay, for the information of the body, this section has been replaced by an amendment made by Senator Calvo earlier. So on section, yeah. So this is chapter 5, part 2. Legislative, executive, legislative, and judicial appropriation, right? Mm-hmm. Right. Wait. Okay. Anybody else before I go to the second round on this section? None? Okay, Senator Ben Pangilinan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I just had, I'm kind of curious at this one section here under W for the Guam Contractors License Board. If you recall, during the last budget hearing, Mr. Speaker, we noted that the Guam Contractors License Board had a budget of about 300,000, and their current fees that they collected before the rate increase or before the fee increases there was about 330,000. So they had a surplus of about 30,000. And then they came in and requested the fee increase that would bring it up to about 600,000. 521 in this case is the number that they finally chose to appropriate. But I'm just wondering, Mr. Speaker, because that means that in order to spend this much money, that the Guam Contractors License Board will have to almost double their staff, or else spend some inordinate amount of money over and above their current operational costs to go from 300,000 to 521,000 in budget. And I'm just kind of curious as to see, where that increase of 220,000 is going to be applied to, because they already had a surplus of about 30 with the current fees. With the fee increases, it brought them to about 600. Their budget is only about 300. And they said they might hire one or two more investigators. And that would be about 30,000 each, and that would give you only 600,000, yet we're increasing the budget by over $221,000. So I'm just kind of seeing where the committee, allocated this increase.
Senator Calvo, Lihio.
Yes, I'll give a general description and then I can get the details for the senator. Again, in the request put out by the Contractors License Board, as a result of a lot of the new construction projects that are on the board and the increase in volume, there was a request for 2 investigators and one supervisor as well as 1 ASO. My staff can get more of the breakdown on the details of the request, but basically, what occurred was the Contractors License Board feels that with the advent of more construction coming into Guam, and even in light of some of the issues that they've had to address in the past in regards to some of the quality of work of some of our contractors, that it was important to beef up this particular area. But I will be having my staff get the information, and of course I'm open again to whatever proposed amendments there may be.
Senator Pangilinan, that was the response of.
Yes, I
Senator
understand that
Calvo.
response, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I attended the industry forum, and there's just no way that the big money we're going to see from any of the increase in anticipated military buildup is going to, in my opinion, require almost a doubling of the staff of the Guam Contractors License Board. I realize the need for ramping up, but you kind of want to ramp up slowly and not just increase your operating costs before the work comes. And those were the same questions I asked before. And if that's how they want to justify it and the committee accepts it, then I guess the committee will vote yes on the bill. And given that I still have some questions on that, then it kind of begins tipping one way or the other for me based on these responses on the bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Senator Gutherts.
Mr. Chairman, I sort of agree with my colleague. Why don't we move that $200,000 to Guam Community College? Because they have indicated to us that they are very concerned about the budget that has been allocated to them. So I'd like to make that motion if there's no objection.
Well, where's your amendment? I need it in writing.
Okay, I'll put it in writing.
And you need to correspondingly change the appropriation and to increase another appropriation.
Okay.
Yes, can I ask the body to please prepare your amendments earlier so that we don't have to keep recessing? Huh? Yes, I do understand. Okay, recess. Okay, everybody has a copy of the Gutter's one-pad amendment. Contractual. Okay, on the Gotthard's amendment, Senator Spaudon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I rise an objection to this amendment, and primarily because right now the Guam Contractors Licensing Board operates with one inspector, and they've been operating with only one inspector for the past X amount of years. Now, the Guam Contractors Association fully endorses this amount because they understand the need that we need to make sure that the that the contractors out on Guam, first of all, are licensed, and the work they're doing does meet the standards that we have set on this island. And by not allowing them to expand their operations at this point in time, first of all, we're already behind. We're not talking about the ramp up right now. We're talking about just being able to service the existing construction that's going on now and what's on the drawing boards. On top of it, we are seeing a lot of construction going on already. I mean, the military may not be in the ramp-up stage for the Marine movement, but we're seeing a lot of construction on Anderson as well as the Navy and even outside the gates. We're seeing a lot of developments. With only one inspector, Mr. Chairman, again, we are not able to make sure that our residents and the consumers of construction are going to be safe. And also actually verify that these people who are representing themselves as contractors, licensed contracts, are indeed licensed. The other portion of this is, when we are talking about ramping up, part of the funds that Guam Contractors Licensing Board is going to go to is to basically computerize their whole system. Right now, they're doing everything manually. So the proposal here is to hire, I believe, four inspectors, 3 inspectors and 1 supervisor, as well as computerize their operations. So I fully object to taking this money away from the Guam Contractors License Board in light of the fact that we're seeing a lot of construction right now. We're behind the 8 ball already in terms of inspecting the projects that have already finished, as well as that are under construction right now. And then again, making sure we're prepared in the next year or two when we see a lot more heightened and increased construction activity in this island, that we're at least in place. So I object strongly to taking this money away from the Guam Contractors Licensing Board. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, on the Gutter's amendment, Senator Pangilinan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, when I brought up the question, of course, if people were listening, I indicated that there was a proposal to hire maybe 2 new inspectors, and that would be about $60,000–$70,000. And then what would the other incremental cost going to be? So I could see, I understand that the incremental cost of maybe the 100,000 or between 60 and 100,000, it's the other 120 that I didn't know how we were going to account for. Now I find out that they're going to hire 4 inspectors instead of 2, of which the last budget cycle they asked for 2 more. And that was really for this coming fiscal year, because we were discussing that in July or sometime like that. So I can see doing some additional staffing at the department and so forth. So my intent wasn't to gut the additional increase, but to justify it and so forth. And computerization, I think, is a good thing. So I wasn't saying take away the entire thing, but balance what it is. And is 521,000 the number, or is there going to be another surplus? Because they already had a surplus in their budget back then. And the estimate in the fees that were going to be increased was about 500 some, or over 600,000 that they would generate under the new fees. So again, we may be a little bit conservative there. And secondly, Mr. Speaker, these contractors don't really inspect projects, or the inspectors. They actually basically handle complaints of shoddy workmanship and contractors not living up to the contract, and so forth. So it's not an everyday thing. It's not something that is, public works inspector was construction can't happen without those inspectors, because they have to go off, they have to sign that rebar's tied correctly and it's ready for pouring. They're the ones who have to sign that the electrical is up to specs and up to codes. These inspectors are not building inspectors. They actually are inspectors, I guess, on investigators almost rather than inspectors for complaints against contractors. At least that's my last recollection. So it's not really critical with regards to the ramping up of the business activity and making sure that we have, individuals, that we don't stop the progress of construction. But, are we going to make sure that we protect the public interest and so forth? So I can see justifying some of the additional increases. I don't think it should be, everything that's generated. I think we should set aside some money for computerization. We don't have that here. There's no plan for spending that additional increase for that purpose. It's just that they're just going to tell us, and that's, I think, something for me that is not as, there's not that sense of comfort that in fact it's going to get applied to these areas and it could just be more personnel, and so forth. So those are my concerns with this, Mr. Speaker.
Any other speaker before I recognize Senator Gutters as the last speaker? Senator Tenorio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Speaker, the issue here is pretty clear, based on the testimony of our colleagues here, that there clearly is a need. Guam Contractors Association License Board needs to ramp up its ability to do its job, and that not just in the sense of personnel but also computers. I hope that there is a middle ground to be struck here. In the absence of getting 4 investigators, including a supervisor, and computerization, perhaps we can ramp it up without taking the full 200,000 and complement the needs of the Guam Community College. I think that we're all reasonable people here. We understand the needs of both agencies, and perhaps we can meet a middle ground. I'd like to offer an amendment. Before I do, though, I'd like to consult with the author. So can we have a 1-minute recess, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah. Are you going to, just clarification, are you going to amend the amendment?
Yes, I may be making an amendment to the amendment.
Okay. 1-minute recess. The Committee of the Whole is back. Senator Tenorio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman,
On the amendment of Gutters.
yeah, I'm not going to move an amendment at this time. It's just simply say that there is some logic in the fact that there's an increase in fees at the Guam Contract Association, and these fees will be realized in the forthcoming months and years as a result of the increase in military and other construction projects. And clearly, there's a related demand on the services provided. And clearly, also, the Guam Community College has a role insofar as the quality of the workmanship coming out of our labor force by virtue of the trades and the education that they offer our people of Guam to contribute to the construction industry. And there's finally one more point, which is the cost to a small agency of taking this $200,000 is probably greater in significance than the benefit it may derive to the recipient of that additional money. So I do understand the sentiments of both the mover as well as the person or our member objecting to this. So I too have some concerns on this, and I'd ask the author to consider that in the final comments she makes. Thank you.
Senator Palacios.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I attended the initial budget hearing when the board come before us, and the amount they indicated, the amount that would put them at a place that would prepare them for the build-up that we anticipate. In fact, the contractors are not beginning to form up. And they're not only that there's only one investigator, but this investigator is to investigate complaints, but beyond that, these are the very people that screen out applicants. They don't even have the ability, the capability to do background check as to the authenticity of claims, of training, or credentials, and so forth. So we just have to settle with that. And this will give them 4 investigators, one of whom will be supervisor. And these are not just investigators, may I repeat. These are people that would check the background, confirm, and even after issuing a license, they still can continue to verify information submitted to it for consideration. And I believe that this is long in coming. And of course, I support the original amount, and we should retain that. They generated the funds. They should be benefited by the funds for the people of Guam. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, any other speaker before I recognize the last speaker? If none, Senator Guthrie, it's on your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I'm a reasonable person, so is my colleague, Senator Wampat. And my purpose in bringing forth this amendment with my colleague, Senator Wampat, was to demonstrate to this legislature that in the proposed budget, the Guam Community College was underfunded about $200,000 for operations compared to last fiscal year. This is a problem for the college. And at some point between now and the close of our deliberations on the fiscal year 08 budget, we're going to have to find about $200,000 for the Guam Community College. If my colleagues are uncomfortable identifying the funds from this particular source, then I would be pleased to withdraw the amendment. But I ask my colleagues here to help identify at least $200,000 for the Guam Community College so that it can sustain its operations at the current level. Because the budget that was presented for this fiscal year underfunded the college by at least $200,000 for operations, and that's really not fair to the college. So I will be coming back later with a request to appropriate $200,000 extra dollars to the Guam Community College. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So, are you saying you're withdrawing your amendment? Okay, any objection for the senator to withdraw her amendment? Found objection, so ordered. Okay, on the section. None. Okay, we're now on section 5, part 2. Miscellaneous appropriation. Chapter 5, part 2, miscellaneous appropriation. Okay, section 1 starts from page 45 to 48. Any comments? Senator Ben?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if I read this section clearly and understand it, I think the net effect of this is that which I'm very pleased with, is that the committee chair has decided to continue the supplemental annuity program for the retirement at the level that it was funded in prior years, instead of I believe it was somewhere in the neighborhood of $1 million that the governor was asking for it, or $3 million. which would have definitely, just cut the retirees where they most hurt, and that is, these retirees, those that benefit from this are those at the bottom end of the annuities that they receive. And somebody just mentioned about, cutting $200,000 from a small agency versus cutting $200,000 from a big agency, and cutting $2,000 from a retiree or $3,000 from a retiree is much more intense than you would cut it from somebody who's more able-bodied and so forth. And I'm sure glad that the good chairman has saw fit not to inflict any additional harm to these retirees by cutting the annuity and the COLA payments. I think we've inflicted enough harm and stress to these retirees with how we've treated them with regards to the Superior Court COLA case, and then on top of that, we added and piled on more stress by telling them that in no uncertain terms from the administration, the governor, that he was even going to cut further from their current COLA and current retiree supplemental annuities. And I just want to commend the good chairman for his action with regards to this section, and it's sections like this that caused me to tip the other way with regards on this budget. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, on the Chapter 5, Part 2. None? Okay, we are on Section 2 now, starting at page 48. Section 2 has subsection I, double I, survivors supplemental annuity addition. If none, Senator Guthertz on Section 2.
I'd just like a clarification, if I may get one from our good chair for finance. Anywhere in this section or in this chapter, is there any reference, I don't see it, but is there any reference to a sliding scale? So there is no sliding scale involved in this retirement
Status quo.
section? All right, thank you very much.
Okay, since there's no other question on Section 2, we are on Section 3. Disability supplemental annuity additions. If none, where's Section 4? Eddie? Okay, Section 4, Senator Respicio. Okay, now we're in Section 5, Appropriation for Cost of Living Allowance, COLA. This section has Section A, subsection A and B. Senator Respicio.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'm also a little bit encouraged here in Section 5 that this substitute version is very different from what the governor was proposing. He was proposing a sliding scale for the $1,100 annual cost of living allowance that our retirees have been receiving for almost 30 years now. And we've already heard from the court that this COLA is a court order, and so that the idea that this is a gift is really been resolved already. My concern here, Mr. Speaker, is although in Section B, there's an appropriation of $6.5 million on lines 12 and 13, it says that the payment shall be made bi-monthly to the retirees beginning October 2007. If you spread $1,100 over 24 payments, I believe, you're looking at $45.83, or to be exact, or rounded off to $46. $46 every 2 weeks, Mr. Chairman, really adds insult to injury. And I'm proposing then to delete lines beginning the payment shall be made bi-monthly, 12 and 13, all the way to the retirees beginning October 2007. So we'll leave that option up to the administration to make the payment as soon as the cash becomes available. When there's a will, Mr. Chairman, the administration finds a way to make these obligations to the retirees, but when there's no will, they don't find the money. But in this case, we're giving the governor the options to spread this entire $1,100 over the course of the next fiscal year, and I don't think that's right.
What is your amendment, Senator Speaker?
My amendment is to delete the sentence, the payment shall be made bi-monthly to the retirees
line is
beginning. Line 12 and 13, page 51.
The payment shall be made bi-monthly to the retirees beginning July.
Historically, the cost of living allowances are paid around November, December to coincide with the Section 30 monies that Governor Guam receives. If this is a true priority, then there should be no problem paying this $6.5 million at one time, where every single recipient will get $1,100 versus spreading this out over a 12-month period. So I have that amendment.
Okay, the Respicia amendment is on page 51, on line 12 and 13, starting from the payment shall be up to line 13, to delete the sentence in its entirety. Senator Calvo.
Yes. Again, I just want to advise the bodies why this particular provision was put in there. Again, when there was the hearings on the COLA, and in fact, it was actually on the COLA settlement as well as on our regular budgets. There has been some statements made by differing groups and retiree groups that they didn't have a problem with that language and doing it in a more how would you say, broken down rather than in a big lump sum. So I was just taking into consideration some of the recommendations put forth in testimony. Obviously, for folks such as me that set out an appropriation, it wouldn't be a major problem either way. And of course, I'll be looking towards the consensus of the body. But the issue, of course, was always the ability and the cash flow situation of the government of Guam, and the requirement to have to build a certain amount of cash and liquidity in order to make out this lump sum payment. So what this provision would do, obviously, would help alleviate that requirement to have to accumulate cash and to pay it all up at once, and pay it more on a more regular basis throughout the year.
On the Respicio amendment, Senator Tenorio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I've always been interested in this and how it's conducted, and it's for that reason that I object to the changing of the language here. The cost of living is not a single event that occurs in October or November every year. Cost of living happens every single day. Retirees have to absorb the additional cost of living, and the cost of living increases by federal governments and other governments and corporations that do have this type of payment to recognize the increasing cost of living to those retirees who relied on the monies that they receive at the time of their retirement, is given to them in apportionment. Every payday, they get a little bit more money. That money goes toward medicine and toward food and toward taking care of the daily cost of life. And this makes so much sense because every time that the retiree gets their check, they're literally going to have more money. And all of their needs and the cost of living goes over the course of a year, not a single event in time. And it makes sense to me that if I was a retiree and I'm getting a little bit more every payday, then I'm recognizing that this money is actually available to me, and I'm seeing that the cost of living allowance is not simply a $1,100 infusion of cash at the end of X number of months, but over the course of many months. And that's every time we have a payment going to our retirees, they're going to see this money. This is something that I had tried to authorize, but I was told in the past that it was already available to the governor. This is the most commonsensical way, I think, to address the cost of living allowance, because every time one of our retirees receives this cost of living allowance, it is going to be embedded in part of their every paycheck that they receive. And I think this is a very prudent move on behalf of your office. So thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for taking my concerns and comments on this, and I do object to the amendment.
Okay, so there has been an objection to the amendment. Is there anyone, if there are no other speakers, there has been an objection. All those in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, amendment fails. Okay. Section 6, Streetlight Fund. Section 6A. Section 6B. Going once, going twice. Okay. Section 7, Workmen's Compensation Fund in page 51A. B, C, D. Okay. Moving along, Section 8, Government of Guam Claims Fund. Oh, Senator Pangilinan, Section 8.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to, I'm a little concerned about this. I was reviewing the Government Claims Fund report that was filed, and in there, for example, we had intermix between the Government Claims Fund and the Residential Treatment Fund. And what we had actually were payments that are required under the Residential Treatment Fund and the other obligations that are funded in other departments and agencies that were being charged against the Government Claims Fund, to me, which doesn't make sense. We actually saw payments for foster parents, in which there's an appropriation for that in the budget, being charged against the Government Claims Fund. And there was treatment for, or payments for off-island residential treatment that were being charged against the Government Claims Fund. And so based on those reports, it gives me great concern that this $100,000, which is meant to pay for unanticipated costs of damage or harm or liability committed against the people of Guam by the government of Guam or its employees, in which the government of Guam is liable for those damages, is charged against the Government Claims Fund. This is like our insurance fund almost. So I just wanted to maybe think of adding an amendment that prohibits that practice, for one. And the other thing is that if they charge against the Government Claims Fund for payment of obligations that are budgeted in other sections of this budget, then that budget shall be reduced by that amount and the money shall be transferred to the Government Claims Fund. Because it really doesn't make sense, for example, that we budget for foster parents at the Department of Public Health, and then when the Department of Public Health doesn't pay them, they go to the Government Claims Fund and take the money out of the Government Claims Fund and pay that foster parent, which Public Health has that budgeted in their budget. So those kind of circumvention of the budget authority contained in the bill and the budget authorizations, I think we're seeing a little bit more creativity on that. And the government claims fund is really for harm, tort claims against the citizens of Guam committed by the government of Guam and its employees, in which they are liable for it, and there's no insurance to pay for them because this is sort of our insurance payment funds for the unanticipated expenses. So I don't know if we need an amendment to this, but I'm very concerned about that because I've seen those entries in the claims that are been paid out of this, and maybe the Attorney General needs to kind of watch that a little bit more carefully because theoretically they're supposed to be approving the payments filed against the government. They have to sign off on these payments and so forth. So if I can consult just with my legal counsel for a minute and see if we might require an amendment on that, Mr. Speaker.
We have to recess.